Welcome to the first in a series of Deep Purple Essentials videos. In this series, I look at each of the lineups with at least 2 albums and select the 5 songs basically that I like most. So in this video, we're going to be looking at Mark 1. And, Rod Evans often gets written off as Deep Purple's weakest singer. But I think these 5 tracks prove that Mark 1 deserves way more respect. So let's briefly talk about the lineup. Mark 1 was together from 1968 to 1969, and they were like the original band. I think they get dismissed because they became, they were before the heavy Mark II sound, and their albums were like stylistically a little all over the place. They hadn't found their voice yet, but the seeds were definitely there. And what makes this era worth understanding? Well, I think beyond the commercial success of Hush, which gave the band an important hook into the US market, what this lineup did was hugely important to the rest of the career of the band, for a couple of reasons. First off, the touring they did gave the core members of the band, I guess Ritchie Blackmore, Ian Paice, and Jon Lord, time to develop as a cohesive unit and sort of move into the heavier improvisational playing that would follow. So, for instance, in Rock, the first studio album from Mark II, would not have sounded like that. That would not have happened had these guys not had the chance to tour extensively as this lineup. And secondly, I think because they tried so many different things in this band, Blackmore and Lord were able to figure out what worked and what didn't. So they were able to distill a lot of what they learned from this. For instance, their jazz, classical, and blues influences. They were able to distill all of that, which sometimes were put on like big rambling pieces in this lineup. They were able to distill that into something punchier, into Mark II. Their influences were all still there in Mark II, but they were just crunchy. So these are the 3 albums that Mark I did. Shades of Deep Purple, 1968. The Book of Taliesyn, 1968 as well. It's crazy, like, these albums were recorded super quickly. I think this one was recorded in 3 days. This was in the run of a week, and they were touring at the time as well. It's insane. And then this album came out in 1969, Deep Purple, and if I'm not mistaken, it was released after Nick Simper and Rod Evans were kicked out of the band. So this album was sort of promoted with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover on board. So those are the albums. So let's dig into the 5 tracks that I think best capture this lineup. So off of Shades of Deep Purple, I would have to say, well, obviously, Hush is the big song. I mean, that was their hit, and that was the breakthrough that established them commercially. A couple years later when Mark II was touring, that was a couple years behind them, but that still gave them a little bit of name recognition in the States, which was, at that time, still a huge market, and that's what enabled them, I think, in some way, shape, or form to tour there. So that's a song off this album. Cut number 2 off the Book of Taliesyn is Kentucky Woman. And I think this, for a couple of reasons, I think this highlighted, showcased, I don't know who did the arrangement. Jon Lord was an amazing arranger, so I think it may have been him. But in any case, it just showed that the band could take a song and just twist it into something else. The Neil Diamond song, of course, Kentucky Woman. And it also, featured a pretty intense guitar solo from Ritchie Blackmore, sort of indicating something on the horizon. So that's track number 2. And the remaining tracks, it's no secret that of the Mark I albums, the third one is my favorite. And I would have to pick Chasing Shadows, which just really highlighted some of the band's progressive elements, and Ian Paice's drum rhythms are just amazing in that. Love that song so much. Why Didn't Rosemary, which featured a guitar and organ solo, trade-off, I guess, in a sense, with a crunchy riff. And that sort of showed a sign of things to come in the band. And finally, April. And that was Jon Lord's most fully realized fusion of rock and classical music yet. I mean, mind you, this was to be expanded further by the concerto for group and orchestra. And while the band eventually abandoned that direction, they were able to incorporate some classical elements into their songs in later lineups. So those are the 5 songs if I had to pick. If somebody were coming up, if some rando on the street were coming up to me and asking, hey, what song should I listen to if I'm getting into Deep Purple Mark I? Those are the 5 songs I'd tell them. So which 5 Mark I tracks would you choose? Drop your picks in the comments below. Next in this series, I'm going to be looking at Mark II Essentials, the classic lineup that everybody knows.